Sorry about that. Better it happens at the beginning than the middle or the end. Get it out of the way. But for those just tuning in, it was a connection error. Well, I was just trying to say that I was supposed to have, like, it was in my Google Calendar that I had a new psychiatrist today after a long time I was supposed to try it. But they never contacted me. Like, you know, if you're familiar with like telehealth appointments and stuff, they will give you a warning a day ahead or sometimes a couple if it's gonna be on a Monday. Anyway, I didn't have that. I actually ended up calling my insurance this morning, because I was concerned, and I couldn't find the company. And they said to me, the insurance, that they would be calling me, the psychiatric people, that they would be calling me 10 minutes before. 10 minutes before came, they never called me. And so, I never ended up going to the grocery store because I'm like, I want to do this. I want to be here and do this whenever, they call. And I'm not like that disappointed. I mean, come on, of all the things like I've been going through, that's small potatoes. So, um, I'll have to just find another one and go through it again, which is, it's time and effort, whatever. But, um, you know, I had to plan a little bit of what I would say, and that part's hard because it brings me to tears thinking of explaining my situation and, the loss of my a dog. Last night I was getting not the trash, I was getting the mail. And whenever I go to the mailbox, I could see him at the gate. He always liked to go out the gate and watch around the neighborhood. And I'd always talk to him, be like, "Hey, Rex, you want to come inside?" And I looked up and I realized like he wasn't there and he wasn't going to be there again. And it's just those things that I don't, I don't totally know how I'm processing. I think I'm kind of hanging on and trying to wait for her to get better. Um, and I really appreciate all the people that care. Like this guy, Mike, gave a donation for Rex and me. And um, this morning I saw it and I thought that was just really, really kind, really generous. And that I have people that care. Um, it really, it lifts me up. It's really the footprints in the sand that aren't mine when you um think, how did I make it this far? So, here I am. There was that dog that I was interested in, and he may have gotten a home already, and I can't be upset if that's the case because I would rather have a dog that can't get a home. So if they send that dog back and they don't want him, maybe it'll be what it's meant to be. But I like to find a dog that's not really has another chance. Like, it just feels like that's what how his spirit would come to me, and maybe it would take more time. But I thought maybe that's what this house needs. Some more light again, like him. Because Fila is sad. She lays in bed a lot. Although today she tried to play tug a little bit and she hasn't done that in so long. And I'm always trying to kind of play with her, like play wrestle her in bed and scratches. And, it's important to be grateful that to show that she's not a constellation prize. It's not like, well, I don't have him, but it's like, no, I love you both equally. And um, I, I don't feel disappointed that it's him and not you. Because I don't know what she's feeling. I can't really talk to her, or she can't really talk to me, but we're getting through it. So anyway, that was today. I couldn't go to the grocery store. That didn't work out with the psychiatrist. So I ended up forcing myself into a nap. And in doing so, taking some things um that would help me rest. And then I wake up s- suddenly and it's like 5:30 and I'm like, "Oh god, I got to get ready." So I haven't even taken a shower. So my hair's kind of crunchy, but I put in hair treatments often at night. I try to treat myself kindly physically, take care of my hair and things, and so but so I can and have a little bit of a hard and serumy appearance. It's not like a soft, silkeny like had I taken a shower and used a mask or something. But this is my day in a nutshell. So I'm just waking up. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I have a coffee over there. So we should be good with that. I may go to the grocery store tomorrow. We'll see. That's my hope. Oh, thank you, Rob. I did try to throw on makeup, but what happened was I feel like I kept messing up and messing up. So I would try to correct with some white and then add some like blusher and be like, no, that's wrong, and mix some lipstick. So I feel I look a little odd, but and I think that this eye is gonna get teary as I read, but again, there are bigger problems in the world, and I'm blessed just to be here with you guys right now, about to read to you. This chapter is called, if I recall correctly, First Blood. I didn't know, because I'm so used to OnlyFans where you can't use the word blood. So I didn't know if on YouTube I could say that, so I'm used to censoring a little bit. So that's why I called this one First Second or something, because I was like, this is the second try of this, but it's also First Blood. I don't know. To me, it made some kind of sense. So that's the title. So let's get into it. We're fully going to war. We're fully going to civil war right now. Isn't this cute? I think it's like a thong in the back. Literally just found this, and it is like a soft, like the softest. I should vocal warm up before a show. Red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow. We'll get into it. Um, like very soft pajama material. You would like to touch it. It's very nice. And then of course some pantyhose that should help from getting banned. We always hope. Mm, mm. It just feels good to lay down. And yes, I will be taking a shower at some point tonight. Of course. The only First Blood I know is Sylvester Stallone movie Rambo. First Blood. I know that's the first thing that came to mind to me too. Um, but I'm sure there's like a symbolic meaning of drawing First Blood. Is like you started it. We'll see. Oh, and this is chapter 13. By the way, they broke for battle at 2:30 a.m., fumbling for something to eat, for muskets and powder, buck and ball. Sleep, if it came, had been shallow and turbulent. In the dark, they marched with stiff limbs toward Bull Run, where two armies the size of cities were massing to clash. I'm waking up. We'll get there. I got a coffee right here. We'll figure this out. Here is our Arthur with the wrestling trivia we all need. Mm. Mm. We're massing to clash. At 5:30, cannons cracked open a day unlike any other in the short history of the Republic. In the largest assemblage of soldiers yet on the North American continent, men of common language and heritage would try to slaughter each other until one side gave way. The Union Army split with a diversion crossing a bridge over the stream, a feint, and the bulk going north, fording Bull Run, and then coming at the rebels from behind. The Irishmen under Colonel Sherman were held back, late to the fight. They heard weak screams of a charge, a louder scream of agony, and always the clap of cannonade in the near distance. For almost an hour they sat by the creek, heart skipping, sweat beating off their brows, listening to war, shot and shell, and every sort of hellish missile swept and tore, whizzed and jarred, smashed and plunged through the trees all about, Maher recalled. At mid-morning, they splashed through the stream single file and started to climb a low rise. Everyone prepared for death, said Maher. Through white smoke, the men of the 69th crept close enough to see the fighting in flashes. A mashed face here, a broken gun there, an arm without a hand. It looked like a rebel retreat, scrawny men running uphill. In the heat of first combat, an Irish commander, Colonel James Haggerty, made his own charge without orders. He was a carpenter from County Donegal, famine Irish like most of his men. Haggerty ran after retreating enemy soldiers. Getting close enough to smell them, a rebel turned, aimed his musket at Haggerty, and fired. The officer fell from his horse, a ball ripping open a gash in his chest. 1 minute he had been Mars' chatty mate, a constant play of humor and goodness. Now Haggerty was a quivering body on the field above Bull Run. His inside spilled onto his shirt. He died where he fell. A fellow Irishman from a Louisiana unit had killed him. I'm just rewinding a little bit to where they say, because I'm like, how the hell did that happen? In the heat of the first combat, so they weren't used to this, an Irish commander, Colonel James Haggerty, made his own charge without orders. So I guess that shows the importance of everyone working kind of together, having a plan because they didn't know, I guess. Um, so he was just a carpenter, an Irish, and he ran after retreating enemy soldiers, get, getting close enough to smell them. So maybe he was running after them, trying to like see if he could get one. A rebel turned, aimed his musket at Haggerty, and fired. Oh, rebel! So that'd be the bad guys. Um, the officer fell from his horse. Yeah. Now Haggerty was a quivering body on the field above Bull Run. His inside spilled onto his shirt. He died where he fell. A fellow Irishman from a Louisiana unit had killed him. Yeah, so they're a fellow Irishman, but they're not in the same unit. Like they're not in the same side. And that's gonna happen. I mean, there are people from the same, you know, states and whatever that it's a weird thing, a civil war, right? Because these are gonna be often people you know. You think of war as opposing countries, it's not the same country. Um, but yeah, so that makes more sense when I read it back. Sorry. It sounded like it was Friendly fire, so-called friendly, right? When you kill someone, by accident. Is this live? Very much so. Hi, Roberts. I sure would like to talk to you sometime. Okay, call me on Friday. Here's a number, right? Oh, why does it say 760? It's not 760. I think it's 442 998 4660. And I probably shouldn't give you that right now because sometimes people call in the middle of the show, but. And I did check and I saw that Rob called. And so Rob has a reserved spot for Friday to call from Connecticut on Friday too. It's good. I like to get new callers. I like to play games with you. All right, where were we? The Confederates regrouped above the stream around a farmhouse owned by a widow, Judith Henry. The Union boys could sense it. The gate did not move. Its forces commanded by General Thomas J. Jackson. He stood in the face of artillery and musket fire, said a rebel officer, like a stone wall, a name that Stonewall Jackson would carry from that point on. The fighting stalled at midday, allowing time for the South to move cannons into place around the widow's house. The lull did not last. The Northerners hammered the Henry compound, killing the widow as she cowered in an upstairs bedroom. The Confederates sent an equal amount of iron and shot back down the slope. To poke a head up and pause for a gulp of summer air was perilous. In mid-afternoon, lying on grass, slick with warm blood, an Irishman lost his ear. Through the smoke, men of the 69th had to dart one way or the other to dodge the bounce of heavy cannonballs. But the plum-sized iron balls that rained from overhead after a lit fuse shell exploded were something else, a random shower. The soldier had looked uphill into the whir of musket fire when his ear was clipped clean by a shell fragment. He put his hands to the bloody opening in his head and screamed as he felt the loss. The Union generals sent several waves up Henry's Hill, and each time they were repelled. Now it was the immigrants' turn. As the temperature climbed, the Irishmen stripped off their shirts and prepared to charge. Bare-chested, they formed a line behind their emerald flag, and with a loud cry ran toward the battery of Southerners. Tightly bunched, the men of the 69th dropped quickly. Legs were knocked out. Faces were torn open by fragments from canisters. Heads split. Every few minutes, a cannonball made a direct hit, decapitating a volunteer or cutting him clean in half. To shoot a man on the run is not an easy thing, not with a heavy musket that fired a single shot at a time. Teeth move faster than trigger fingers, tearing open cartridges, the powder blackening lips. Compounding the problem was identification. Some of the enemy buzzing around the house wore blue, some wore gray. Some wore the clothes of a field hand. The Irish led one charge with Maher on a white horse and were cut down. They tried a second time, even as other Union soldiers started to melt away in the wrong direction. This too was repelled. A third assault followed and again was rolled back at high cost in blood. Mark tried to continue the fight, to push through to the house and break Confederate will. His men briefly crested the hill. We felt quite elated, a soldier of the 69th told the New York Times. Then, out of the fields to the side, out of nowhere, a rush of fresh Southern soldiers charged forth. These reinforcements, thousands of them, had come from the Shenandoah Valley, where they were supposed to have been kept in place by another Union force. As tired, dehydrated, and dispirited as the American soldiers were, the rebels, new to battle, were fully charged, letting loose a blood curdling yell. At the same time, showers of iron and grape shot from cannons increased. Not a space between Union soldiers was free of lethal projectiles. Bodies covered the grass of the hill, the blood turning brown under the sun. We beat their men, Maher said. Their batteries beat us. That is the story of the day. Loss begot chaos. What does that mean? Their batteries beat us. I guess that's a nod to how having tools helps, having artillery, having manpower, but also other power. All helps. Yes, it is getting intense, very intense war here. It makes you feel lucky you didn't have to be out there, you know? Let's see. And it wasn't like there was very good, even like right now you have army medics. They have better what's called um like on the field dressing, field care, um kind of in those emergency situations. What can you do when you're not in a hospital, right? But there was very rudimentary, very beginning. It wasn't. They basically you cut off limbs and wrap it up. Maybe give them some liquor. Not great. Uh, okay. Loss begot chaos. General McDowell's Union soldiers headed for safety, back across Bull Run, quick stepping and then sprinting, a dash of fear. Already weakened by hunger and heat, many threw down their weapons and ran. Mark was stunned at the sight of an army fleeing from a fight. To go to war requires the suspension of survival instincts. Easier said than done. What are you, drugging them? If the illusion cannot be sustained, base human fear takes over, swept up in the stampede of retreat. Well, it's valid fear. You have every reason to be afraid. Could you imagine if like hails of bullets or whatever is like spraying around your house and you're like, it's fine. Everything's fine. Like, then I'm just chill. Like, no. I bet that's what it's like to live in some parts of Chicago at times. I mean, I don't know if it still is, but scary. The Irish stumbled back down toward the stream with the main army protecting the rear. Their lips were cracked and parched, their legs heavy. Some were barefoot. Corcoran ordered his men to form into a square that could slow the enemy advance and maybe start a counterattack. But his group was soon separated in the haze of surrounded by secessionists. Where was Corcoran? Mark cried out for his friend from 1848. Word came that he was killed. No, wounded or captured. Command now fell to Maher, whose cap had come off. He mounted his horse and waved the unfurled green banner of the 69th. Look at that flag, he yelled. Think of Ireland. Would the harp outlaw instrument in the days of the British penal laws still have power in a new world clash? Poised to spill Southern blood, the Irish captain tried to hold the line. Mar was knocked from his mount and smashed into the ground. His horse had been pummeled, torn open by cannon shot.
tossing him into a heap. His vision blurred, his hearing went to a white noise monotone and then nothing. He lay face down, spread eagled in reddish Virginia dust, unconscious, his body splattered in horse blood and scraps of the animal's flesh and hide. As waves of Federals fled, rebels chased them in high-spirited pursuit. Maher would have been captured or had a bayonet run through his rib cage had not a lone soldier gone back to rescue him. Private Joseph P. McCoy, a student from a Jesuit college, grabbed Maher and horse-collared him back toward the fleeing Union soldiers. The captain was placed in a wagon, which bounced along the uneven field. Minutes later, the horse pulling the carriage took a load of shot in its flank and reared up in agony. The animal fell, the wagon capsized, and Maher was pitched into the stream. The splash shook him fully back to consciousness, but the sight all around him was a heap of loss and abandon. Here it was that the panic took place, he recalled. Up to this point, there was no fright, no alarm, no confusion. Caught in the break for safety was a New York congressman, Albert Ellie, who had ventured down from the picnic grounds for a closer look at combat. A rebel soldier wanted to kill him. You infernal son of a bitch! You came to see the fun, did you? God damn your dirty soul! Nearby, on the rise that the Union had failed to take, Jefferson Davis rode up to view the battlefield. He had come from Richmond on the train, traveling over the rail line that was supposed to be turned into a Union one way to the Confederate White House. The fussy Davis arrived in time to hear Stonewall Jackson's boast on behalf of the slaveholding nation. We have them whipped. They ran like dogs, Jackson told him. Give me 10,000 men like them, and I shall take Washington City tomorrow. Lincoln's soldiers limped back to Camp Corcoran, collapsing into their tents at 3 a.m. The Union reported these casualties: 625 men killed, 950 wounded, 1,200 captured. Confederate losses were 400 killed, about 1,600 wounded. 38 Irishmen from the 69th died at Bull Run. Another 59 were seriously hurt, and nearly 200 were missing. Corcoran was presumed dead or captured, and Maher, some New York papers reported, had been killed. The Union had been humiliated. So we don't know really what happened to Corcoran yet, but in the interim, Maher's now in charge of that battalion, I guess. That was true to a point. The Irish had performed and admirably, as even Sherman noted afterward in his official report. The sewage from the city won praise from both sides. The immigrants charged when others would not. They held firm and fired back when others threw down. What's this? Messy, messy. Mm. The Irish can fight. What can I say? They were among the last of the Union soldiers to retreat. Still, a British correspondent from the Times of London ridiculed Maher, saying the fall from his horse was due to drunkenness, a story reprinted in the American press. They may have been a larger motive behind the misinformation. If Maher was serious about raising an army to eventually liberate Ireland, better that he be stopped now. By contrast to eventually liberate. By contrast, the New York Times quoted an eyewitness who said Maher was remarkable, and his bare head urging his men forward. A few days later, 29 officers in Maher's unit wrote a letter to the New York papers praising Maher's performance. On the march, no one was more eager in battle, none more reckless of his life. At camp, the deflated band made plans to return home. War was horrible, and it was now clear would not be short. The day after the battle, Lincoln signed a bill authorizing the enlistment of 500,000 men for 3 years of duty, a professional army for the long haul. A second bill called for an additional 500,000 men. Maher was ready to follow Lincoln, but how? A citizen soldier for now, his tour of duty was up. He packed to go home to Elizabeth and an uncertain future, but William Tecumseh Sherman would have none of it. Eyes narrowed, hair unkempt, the colonel growled at Maher. How can you go to New York, he asked him, in the company of the unpaid men of the 69th? I do not remember to have signed a leave for you. Maher said his 90 days had expired. He was a free man, not a professional officer in the regular army. So were the others. You are a soldier and must submit to orders until you are properly discharged. To make his point, Sherman moved closer and spoke loud enough for every one of his soldiers to hear. Oh, the old public humiliation tactic. Is it going to work? Yes, I remember walking, hearing shots. I can remember hearing gunshots on like the 4th of July, like celebratory gunshots. Yeah, I can tell you the dogs don't like it. I can tell you that. Okay. If you attempt to leave without orders, it will be mutiny, and I will shoot you like a dog. Like a dog? That's rude. Marr retreated to his tent. Sherman had shamed him before his friends. Oh, thank you, Jerry. Super fan. Worse, he made it clear he had no respect for these men. In the afternoon, a gangly, black suited visitor with the pallor of gloom came to visit the New York Irish, President Lincoln. We thought we would come over and see the boys, he said. The unusual timbre of his voice, a bit high, caught the men by surprise. On Sunday, the blue sky, day of battle, Lincoln had gone for a ride in the country outside the Capitol, reasonably confident of victory. That evening, he read a telegram of startling news from his War Departments. The day is the day is lost, save Washington and the remnants of his army. Monday it rained, whether to match the mood of broken men in bandages and tattered clothes staggering through the streets. They came along in disorderly mobs. Whitman wrote, queer looking objects, strange eyes and faces, drenched in the feet. Where are your banners and your bands of music? Some supporters urged the president to give up the fight. If it best for the country and mankind that we make peace with the rebels at once and their terms, Do not shrink even from that. Horace Greeley wrote Lincoln, but the Confederates, despite Stonewall Jackson's boast, were in no shape after Bull Run to storm the White House. A much bigger Union army stood guard on the banks of the Potomac. Lincoln's task was to gird a confused nation for a long war. In the days following the defeat, he wanted to see soldiers who would not run from battle. Sherman, despite his low regard for the Irish, knew what they were worth to him. I have the Irish 69th New York, which will fight, he wrote the War Department. Lincoln shook hands with the bedraggled Irishman, offering encouragement. Bull Run was just one battle, not the war. Next time would be better, and there was certainly a place in the vast new American force for the immigrants. More than a nod to ethnic tolerance, Lincoln needed the nearly 2 million Irish in the country to fight for a splintered nation. Northern factory owners, businessmen, and Main Street merchants were about to give up their livelihoods to risk death in the South. The farmers from whose ranks the American revolutionists had drawn some of their best marksmen were seasonal soldiers, available mainly in the winter, when fields were dormant but fighting was a logistical nightmare. The urban poor, the immigrants without trades, might have to form the backbone of the new Union Army. Whether they would die for this country was still an open question. To Lincoln's kind words, the Irish 69th gave a president they would never vote for a Gaelic cheer. He was moved, a crooked smile breaking the Undertaker's face. I confess I rather like it. Was there anything he could do for them? Be honest, he told the men. Maher stepped forward, since being thrown from his horse, losing friends to combat, the shine of the orator was gone. He looked haggard, with lips tight, eyes clouded, a full half-foot shorter than Lincoln. Mr. President, I have a cause of grievance. Yes. This morning I went to Colonel Sherman and he threatened to shoot me. Lincoln tipped his head, puzzled. Unwilling to get in the middle of a spat between officers, he threw off a joke with some truth to it. If I were you, he said, and he threatened to shoot, I would trust him. For one of the few times in his life, Marr was speechless. Still, the 69th was mustered out of duty. A few days later, free to return home, as the Irish captain had requested, Lincoln would remember Thomas Francis Marr. Chapter 14. The Call, the Fall. He could not forget Haggerty, his chest blown open. Moved like Jagger. You're gonna have that song stuck in my head. The Christina Aguilera part. Move. He could not forget Haggerty, his chest blown open, and Corcoran gone to the fog of war, who may still be alive. They don't know what the hell happened to him. Friends who'd follow him from Waterford to life's end in a Virginia field. War was not fit for poetry. Back in New York, he told Libby what he'd seen and what he'd heard. A horse shredded a boy, suddenly blind and crying for his mother, prayers and curses. One at and the same. It was not glorious at all. Men I knew and loved and they lie there in the rich sunshine, discolored and cold in death. The rumors about Corcoran gave way to a letter in his hand from a cell in Richmond. He was held by the rebels, caught when he tried to defend the rear of the Union army. After losing sight of his main unit, he and a dozen or so soldiers and had holed up in a cabin where the Confederates found them. More than a prisoner of a 4-month-old war, Corcoran was a prize for the South. They offered to release him if he would publicly vow not to fight, a powerful disincentive to other Irish. He refused and was eventually transferred to a damp, lightless cell in Charleston and put in solitary confinement. Should the North execute a single prisoner, it was announced Michael Corcoran would be hanged. Someone had to fill the void to lead the Irish. No sooner had Maher returned to New York than requests poured in for him to take up where Corcoran had left off. Orator, barrister, scholar, journalist, revolutionary, adventurer, and part-time soldier he was, but a commanding military officer. His little Zaub unit of volunteers had put up a fight at Bull Run. But they'd been routed along with other New Yorkers. Still, there would be no sitting out this war for Maher. After a few days at home, he went back to Washington to look after the wounded from the 69th. Young men who had run through an Irish Vale as children or played gangrenous or played full-throated hurling matches with other lads, now lay on cots, their gangrenous limbs awaiting the surgeon's handsaw. It was stomach turning. You can still find stuff like that on, like, I don't know about eBay, but like, um, you know, auctions and stuff with like actual like saws and stuff that they would have used like a kit. So it's so barbaric. It was stomach turning, these boys with their disfigured bodies, but it spurred Marr to give meaning to the loss. The War Department proposed to make him a captain in the regular army. Good pay, good post, perhaps most ceremonial, an Irish American on uniform display. A better offer came from John C. Fremont, the Pathfinder, one-time presidential candidate, now a major general in St. Louis, commander of the Department of the West. Amar could be his aide-de-camp as a colonel. Marr turned down both requests. His fate was with the New York Irish. I cannot find it in my heart to part from my tried and honored comrades, he wrote. He would prefer the humblest position in their ranks to the highest I could hold with newer friends. An idea was taking hold. Why not outfit an all Irish brigade? The 69th was Hibernian to the core, but not formally established as such. This new creation would be a distinct ethnic unit of at least 4 regiments, with its own flag, its own pipe and drum corps, its own priests and surgeons, its own poet laureate. The notion was floated in Boston, Philadelphia, and New York, home to the largest concentration of Irish laborers ripe for recruitment. The plan played to Marr's heart, stirred by his reading of countrymen who had formed Gaelic units for the French and the Spanish in the past, the vaunted wild geese. It played also to his Irish insecurity, the chip holding down his shoulder. He would show William T. Sherman what it meant to lead men into battle, and yet bark out his orders with a brogue. But what would happen if the brigade was a bust? If the immigrants failed to fight, fell apart, deserted, turned on Maher, if they only confirmed the low opinion held of them by the know-nothings, what if the Union lost? For what purpose then would Maher have recruited people to risk death in a new country? To Maher, the perils were outweighed by the draw, being part of something greater than any one Irishman or any one American. I mean, there's always reasons to not do something. But there's a quote that's important to keep in mind. It goes like this: argue for your limitations and you get to keep them. And I try to remind myself that whenever I'm, you know, steadfastly arguing to myself of, you know, with my anxieties of why I just can't do something. Because it's like you get what you wish for, that you don't have to, and then um you're not very happy, are you? So, um, there's always going to be reasons, and on the con side you could find, but um, why not? Like overall, um, for a man who fed off crowds, the gathering on August 29, 1861, at Jones's Wood in New York was a feast. The patch of farmland overlooking the East River, 132 acres in what would be subdivided as 66th to 75th Streets, was a pleasure ground for New Yorkers fleeing their tenement traps. It had beer gardens, games of chance and strength, amusements and oddities, picnic tables. On this Sunday, it was transformed into the largest rally of Irish yet on the continent. The festival was ostensibly a benefit to help the widows and families of those killed at Bull Run. Admission 25 cents a person, but it became a recruitment drive for an Irish brigade that would be formed out of the New York 69th, with units from other parts of the Northeast. Mar on Silver Namen Mountain in 1848 was a boy revolutionary under a summer sun, trying to raise soldiers from the starving. Now at Jones's Wood, he once again put his voice to work for a fledgling army. The turnout was estimated at 60,000 by the New York Times. No gathering of that size and character has ever occurred in this city, the paper reported. Marr mounted a large stage at the front of grounds festooned with the flags of the harp of the United States of Ireland. The chatter stilled, the music and dancing stopped. It was the perfect match of man and masses, the Times noted. Captain Thomas Francis Marr understands the character of his countrymen better, perhaps, than any other man in this country. To great affluence of language, he combines a quickness of imagery which, even a duller race than the Irish, is delightful, or even to a duller race. This book, I'll show you the cover. It's titled "The Immortal Irishman: the Irish Revolutionary Who Became an American Hero." National Book Award winner. And it's about a man. You can see his picture here, maybe better this way. That's him right there, Thomas Francis Marr. Um, but yeah, you could call it the Irishman for sure. What are you offended by? I heard from you that you ain't even Irish, Terry. You've turned your back on your people. What of the cause in which our countrymen fell that day? Was it urgent? Was it just? Was it sacred? He let the words linger, the pause for effect, the long silence, when he answered his own question. Never was there a cause more urgent, more just, more sacred. Through the big field came a ripple of applause and cheers, but also some jeers, some drunken catcalls, some cans of discontent who wanted to die for Abraham Lincoln or were slaves. Maher powered forth, pressing the issue. Will the Irishmen of New York stand by this cause resolutely, heartily, with inexorable fidelity, despite all the sacrifices it may cost, despite all the dangers into which it may compel them, despite the bereavements and abiding gloom it may bring? We will, but again, more cackles from the Lincoln haters. Marr sensed the doubt and was quick to improvise. I'm a Democrat. To this, the biggest cheers to get. For my part, I ask no Irishman to do that which I myself am not prepared to do. My heart, my arm, my life is pledged to the national cause. I care not to what party the chief magistrate of the republic has belonged. I care not upon what plank or platform he may have been elected. Hear, hear. The platform disappears before the Constitution under the oath he took on the steps of the Capitol on the day of his inauguration. Hear, hear. The party disappears in the presence of the nation. And then a jab at the enemy of more than 500 years. I should remind my countrymen that the English aristocracy, boo, damn them, which is the dominant class in England to which the navy, the church, the army almost exclusively belong. I should remind my countrymen that this aristocracy is arrayed against the government in Washington and that it was dead against the revolution. Every blow that clears the way for the stars and stripes deals to this English aristocracy a deadly mortification and discouragement. He could have carried on against Britain, punch lines against punching bag all afternoon, but he closed, after speaking for an hour in the August heat, with a nudge to get people down to a recruiting office at 596 Broadway above the Metropolitan Hotel. Let us who hail from Ireland stand to the last by the stars and stripes. Marr would refine the case against the South over the following months, a traveling rally igniter for the Union cause. He was also a fire hose, putting out flare ups of opposition. His strongest argument for the Irish was linking the Confederacy to the hated oppressor, England. As he had done in New York, the Great Hunger was never far from his Gaelic memory. Loved ones driven from their own land, their huts pulled down or burned above their heads, turned out by the roadside or into the ditches to die. As Marr had said at several stops, his case linking the English crown and the American South was only part hyperbole. Great Britain had outlawed slavery more than a generation earlier, but few nations benefited more from slave labor than England, with its looms, mills, and clothing factories running full bore to outfit the and enrich the aristocracy that Marr had chastised at Jones Wood. The textile industry was the dynamo of England's industrial revolution. 1 in 5 in Britain was connected to the trade, and almost 80% of the cotton for that industry came from the slaveholding South. To keep the currency of cotton from crossing the Atlantic, the American Navy set up a blockade of southern ports. England was warned not to interfere. At the same time, The South worked diplomatic channels, seeking recognition of its sovereignty by the world's most powerful empire. All of that gave Mar plenty to work with. It is a fact that after all her denunciations and horror of slavery, England is for the South, where slavery is in full blast, and against the North, where it has long been extinct. He thundered in Boston's Music Hall one night in September 1861. In spite of Shakespeare and Bacon, England is no sentimentalist, no poet, and no philosopher, he said. It is a nation where cotton is more precious than political principle. His case was buttressed when an American warship seized two Confederate diplomats from a British vessel off Cuba in November. The men were on their way to London in search of formal recognition of the breakaway nation. The empire was outraged by the seizure. You may stand for this, Prime Minister Palmerston told his cabinet, but damned if I will. He ordered troops to Canada, a menace on the American border, and demanded an apology from Lincoln, a red-faced England bullying and saber-rattling, making demands of the United States on behalf of the South. Marr could scarcely have asked for better material. In Boston, in a hall so packed that 20,000 people had to be turned away, in a state where the Know Nothings had won political control a few years earlier and disbanded the Irish National Guard militias, Marr hit all of his high points. Almost 10 years earlier, anticipating Marr's arrival after his escape from Tasmania, a paper in Boston had predicted great things for the exile. As leader of the Irish masses in the New World, he was in town now to build the largest army yet of Irish in America. The nativist day was done, he said. The immigrants' time was at hand. Here, at this hour, I proclaim in the center of that city where this insult was offered to the Irish soldier, Know Nothingism is dead. He had to pause for several minutes to let the cascade of cheers subside. He praised the Irish laborers who built the railroads, who dug the canals and constructed the reservoirs, he who cleaned the streets in their adopted country, who wiped the faces of the children of the wealthy. This is the only nation where the Irish can reconstruct themselves and become a power. This too I know, that every Irishman this side of the Mason-Dixon line is with me. If there is one who is not, let him take the next Galway steamer and go home. He left Boston with commitments to fill two regiments in the Irish Brigade. His Philadelphia pitch was so effective, it alarmed Confederate spies in the city's midst. He made a capital speech. I feared a telling one, an informant wrote Jefferson Davis. I worked night and day to neutralize his speech. His marriage with a Yankee girl was an admirable argument against him. That Yankee girl had thrown herself fully in with her husband's cause. She not only walked with him at the front of parades, but worked New York City society behind the scenes and helped design one of the brigade flags. The fear of some Irish was that the marriage of a fiery Catholic Celt and the Fifth Avenue Protestant would make Marr more like a Townsend. The opposite was happening. It was an odd thing to see this beautiful and gifted wife beside him, as one officer recalled while he drilled new recruits at Fort Schuyler at the southern tip of the Bronx. She was his shadow and he hers, in the low angled autumn light glinting off bayonets moving in formation. The waters of Long Island sound in the near distance. drums and bugles and bagpipes, a soundtrack for soldiers yet to see conflict. Libby became so devoted to the Irish Brigade that one of the regiments was nicknamed Miss Marr's Own. When not at the fort, the couple worked on persuading immigrants to sign up for the headquarters of the Irish Brigade on Broadway. Young men with bruised knuckles and thin-soled shoes wandered in curious, unknowing of military matters. Heads packed with half-truths about the, oh God, blank lover, Abraham Lincoln, in a room that was unfurnished but for a desk, a couple of chairs, and a bench. The Mars tag team strangers soft sell patriotism from her, high minded appeals to Irish nationalism from him. Before long, he had nearly 3,000 men. The name of Maher, wrote one journalist who watched him in the months following Bull Run, is now more than ever a word of talismanic power. He came to know many of his soldiers well, their families, their home countries, their losses in the famine. As autumn dragged on and fresh warfare approached, Marr made a vow of fidelity to his reprobation and of danger. He said in a speech at Fort Schuyler, "In the camp, on the march, in the battle, I shall be with you, close to you, true to you, heart and soul with you in defeat, if such be the divine decree, and with you in death." Oh my God, thank you, Jerry. Congratulations to everybody that's getting one. That's so wonderful that you're joining. I love you all. And I can't wait to do a special stream for you soon. Okay. Where was I? Jerry, that was very kind. Um, mm. In between heaping scorn on the South and trying to fill his Irish men with a sense of national purpose, Marr took a break to honor a close friend, Terence McManus, the merchant who had abandoned his prosperous wool trade to take up revolution with Young Ireland, had died in California. Marr took the loss hard. Both had been fated for hanging, drawing and quartering. Both had been condemned to a lifetime in Tasmania. Both found new life in America, though McManus had kept a low profile. Marr was ever grateful to McManus for showing up at his wedding to the governess in the penal colony when his other friends shunned him. As well, he remembered what a lift he got from the diversion of backgammon and fishing, and the ship that took them to their exile, and how the escape from McManus had spurred him to plot his own dash for freedom. At a large gathering in New York, prompted by the arrival there of McManus's body, Marr recalled a man of wealth, fully settled in Liverpool, who gave it all up to help his people across the Irish Sea, radiant, hardy, full of pluck, and teeming with brain, and having a proud, dutiful, chivalrous thought for Ireland all the while. During the short days of December 1861, the Irish practiced at being soldiers just outside of Arlington, Virginia, at Camp California. They wore Union blue now, a jacket falling just below the waist, pants held up by suspenders, and a big cape of heavy wool that served as overcoat and blanket. Their weaponry was old century, Prussian smoothbore muskets, arms suited for the slow marching masses of European cannon fodder. The fate of the Union had been placed in the hands of a little man with a big opinion of himself. General George B. McClellan, well credentialed from a wealthy family. McClellan had graduated near the top of his class at West Point, proved himself a brilliant logistician in the Mexican War, and run a railroad in the private sector, all before his 40th birthday. But he never mastered the military discipline of keeping his non military thoughts to himself. He despised abolitionists. Help me dodge the blank. We want nothing. We want nothing to do with him. He wrote one high ranking political friend. I am fighting to preserve the integrity of the Union. Sure you are. Sure you are. Mm. McClellan did not think much of his commander in chief. Lincoln, he said, was a well meaning baboon, his inferior in class, breeding, and intellect. McClellan's task was to make the Army of the Potomac, soon to be the largest fighting force on earth, into a war machine that could conquer. Everyone from the president on down played nice to McClellan. I find myself in a new and strange position here. He wrote his wife from the capital. By some strange operation of magic, I seem to have become the power of the lands. After Lincoln named him general in chief of all Union forces, as well as the commander of the Army of the Potomac, it occurred to the president that he might have put too much on Mac's shoulder. The man some were now calling young Napoleon shrugged. I can do it all, he said. Maher liked McClellan, something in his swagger. As much as he despised the civilians above him, McClellan connected with the soldiers below him, and Mac treated the immigrants much better than Sherman ever did. The Irish Brigade was now outfitted with an artillery unit and several regiments. Maher was the commander in all but title. Influential friends had pressed Lincoln to name him a general. His speeches, particularly at Jones Wood, had impressed the president. Lincoln knew Maher was a Democrat and had not voted for him, all the better for unity's sake. In some cases, Maher stated the cause for the North better than Lincoln had done. His appeal also crossed the Atlantic, holding out the possibility. Mm, mm. I don't have any buttons. What are you talking about? I have snaps, but I don't have buttons. Mm, I can open them on my OF, like I took down my dress last night out of the shelf. Right now, I think I'm just going to read to you.
Where was I? Mm. Let Thomas Francis Maher be appointed a brigade general, he told his War Department secretary. Still, there were concerns. Mm. Mar was a fugitive, an outlaw, a man whose best weapons were words. While Mar waited for Congress to grant his commission, the Irish shivered through the winter intense, ripped by wind and sagged by snow. They slept on boards and boughs a few inches above the frozen ground, with heavy, foul smelling wool blankets for warmth. Tents had a small stove for heat, the smoke vented by a pipe about the same diameter as Lincoln's top hat. A persistent problem with finding dry wood, the men built fires of soggy green pine logs and needles still holding frost. The smoke was so thick that tent flaps had to be opened at night, losing the heat. Outside, after much drilling and horse trampling, the byways were a porridge of mud on warmer days. An officer walking from one row of tents to another got stuck in Virginia mire. He sank so deep that he needed the help of a soldier to free him with a shovel. In the long lockup of winter, between incessant freezing rains and face lashing blizzards, hundreds of horses died. Mar's appointment came through in February 1862. Among the top brass in the army, he was dismissed as a political general, one of Lincoln's patronage plums, designed to bring an ethnic constituency to arms. No one expected him to be much of a warrior, but for the Irish, the new command lifted the gloom of winter camp. In celebration, soldiers lit an enormous bonfire, played music, and honored Mar with a dinner that stretched to the early hours. With a sense of style and vanity that dated to his upstaging of a Shakespeare play at Stonyhurst, Mar was radiant in the costume of his latest role. He wore a uniform Livy had designed, a sash diagonally across the chest, a gold shoulder belt, a sword by his side, drooping to just above the ground. It was no small thing to have the patriot and revolutionary, a man still wanted by the British Empire for treason, one of us, elevated to the highest ranks of the American military.
In Mar's time, the Irish had been starved, bundled off to the penal colony, and forced to flee dank tenements in strange cities. But here, less than a decade after the end of the Great Hunger, a few years after the Know Nothings had tried to deprive them of standing in their new nation, the Irish were ascendant in a conflict to save the half democracy. When an Irish brigade chaplain, Reverend William Corby, a college professor on loan from Notre Dame, met Maher in the frigid muck of winter camp, he found a man whose uniform could barely contain him. One of the finest looking officers in the whole army, he wrote, General Maher was more than an ordinary gentleman. The priest noted he possessed a high tone, sentiments, and manners, and the bearing of a prince. He had a superior intellect, a liberal education, a fine classical writer, and a born orator. He was very witty, and when the brigade got instructions to move, responding to Lincoln's general War Order Number One to throw the huge expanse of men against the Confederate capital, the cleric saw another side of Mar. It was while waiting to shed blood, certain that he would lose friends on his orders, that Mar began to drink heavily again. As a brigade general or a brigadier general, he carried the hopes of the Irish in America on his gold braided soldiers. The burden of grief was his as well. Though the prankster in him was finally tamed, he would do everything to find some joy at the margins of war. At times, his convivial spirit would lead him too far, said Father Corby, but by no means must it be concluded from this that he was a drunkard. Beside, he was polite and gentlemanly even while under the influence of liquor, never sinking to anything low or mean beyond indulging too freely in unguarded moments. He drank to elevate occasions, yes, but he also drank in the hours between bloodlettings, during numberless days of killing and dying, in moments when he felt weak and full of doubt. Oh, Malimo! Hi! You made one! I've been seeing you like my posts, but I hadn't got to talk to you in a while. Congratulations, everybody that got one. Wow. Must have got over 20 something members tonight. How wonderful. I'm thinking of making my Friday show members only this week. We'll see. So, anyway, it'll be fun. That is the end of chapter 14. I say we end it there so we can pick it up in a new chapter tomorrow, which has a lovely name called The Summer of Slaughter. What did you think of that? Try to make sure that's not coming off. It reminds me of how strong you can be by getting constituencies of people together in groups. Like, I know that there was
units of um black people, like the Tuskegee, like, and how um they can, like, it's uh, I'm not advocating of segregation per se. I'm actually emphasizing how in any party, like in any kind of goal you have, that getting groups, like getting the Irish together to be like, yeah, we have, something to gain in this, and something to someone to say, we should, want to fight this, and why you have a role in doing so, because I think that that is still today. um People have their own reasons, and sometimes just needing that motivation, and it can come by people that can relate to you. Say like like women's causes, like if you have a group of women, and maybe you can get them to join your cause by showing how they could be helped too, or how they're part of this, you know what I mean? um so I think that what he's doing with the Irish is really great. But I assume tomorrow it's going to be a lot of death. Was it a deadly war? It's going to be interesting, and you can already see how they're showing how just drinking. He didn't live very long. I mean, he died in his 40s, right? So, and then I know he makes it to Montana, but so there probably is something to be said of beginning to sort of unravel this. Probably post trauma, the drinking things to get by, maybe do him in the end. We'll see. Summer of Slaughter sounds like a good movie title. Speaking of, I never finished watching that Black Bag movie. I've been like this lately where I haven't been able to finish things. I did finish, like I said, that Pee Wee Herman. I finished Hacks. Those are in shorter episodes. And I think the way my brain has been lately, I've been having trouble just sitting through like a movie, like a full movie, and like finishing it. I'm sure that'll get better, but it's just weird right now where I try, and then towards the end, I can't, I don't make it. Maybe I get tired. Anyway, that is how it's been for me. But there was something. Was there something I wanted to? I can't even remember. Anyway, wish me luck. Maybe getting groceries tomorrow. Maybe not. Um, we we'll see. Good night. I love you. I love reading to you. I love all of my new members and my generous um uh, donators. You're very sweet, and you made my night. So, mwah. Love you.